But thank you, Layla, for, coming and spend some time with us. Post GDC presentation round two, Electric Boogaloo.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, I'm excited too. With all the noise and the hustle and bustle of GDC, it's like now we can really sit and focus and dedicate some good time to hearing about your process, having you take us through this amazing project you made, the Fantasy Castle. That is just a gorgeous, stunning piece of artwork, and I'm just like I love it. It's one of my favorites that I've seen our mentees come out with it. It's so beautiful. Um,
Thank you.
but thank you so much. For anybody, joining, just to let you know, I'm Penny. I'm the community organizer here in Vessel Forge. So if you have any questions at all, either during, before, or after we're through here, just please don't be a stranger. You can DM me anytime. You can pop off questions in the chat. I'm gonna be here hanging back while Layla presents her presentation. So just feel free to ask any questions. We're super happy that you guys made it. I'm really happy to see so many familiar names come and support Layla. And obviously, we just want to stay inspired. And, there's some really good quality work here that I'm sure she's very excited to share with you. So thank you very much for joining and stick around. Ask some questions, ask her about her process, what it's like. Going through some of these techniques and workflows. So, we're excited to chat with you a little more in depth about this. And overall, Layla, I'm gonna let you take it away, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like Penny said, thank you everyone for coming. I'm super excited to be able to present my work again, this time on Discord. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump into it. So my name is Laela Russell. I'm currently a 3D environment artist, and last summer I completed an 8-week mentorship with Jonathan at VesselForge. And today I'm going to be breaking down my mentorship project, Fantasy Castle, as well as giving you all an insight into what it's like taking a VesselForge mentorship. So, before we get into my project, I'm going to tell you all a little bit about me. I've always been passionate about art my entire life, but I specifically got into 3D art during high school, and I started with taking summer classes at Noman and Art Center. After that, I attended Ringling College, where I majored in game art, and I graduated in the class of 2024. A random fun fact about me is that I love horror, and I would love to work on a AAA horror title someday. And on the right here, you'll see two examples of some of my projects from my time at Ringling. The bottom is a biome project that I did junior year, and the top was my senior thesis project. I started out my career as an environment art intern at Obsidian Entertainment right out of college, where I then got hired full-time as an associate environment artist. I've been working at Obsidian since then, and I recently shipped my first title, The Elder Worlds 2. And here's just a really quick snapshot of some of the work that I did on that project. And to get into the Vessel Forge mentorship, I chose the 8-week environment art mentorship with Jonathan. I wanted to expand my knowledge and connections in the industry, and I've been following Jonathan for a while ever since I got the chance to meet with him at Ringling. So as soon as I saw the Vessel Forge announcement, I was really excited to sign up. So when approaching this mentorship, I had a few key goals. I wanted to practice sculpting, learn and practice mesh painting workflows, and finally create a stunning piece that would complement my existing portfolio. And after talking it through with Jonathan, we decided that that meant creating something that stands out and contrasts from my past work. Here you'll see a screenshot of what my portfolio looked like at the start of the mentorship, and you'll notice that when approaching projects, all of my ideas were well within my comfort zone. So that's something that Jonathan encouraged me to step beyond and to choose a project with a color palette that would really stand out from the rest of my work. So this is the concept that we settled on. You're going to notice some of the strongest elements in this scene are the grand cathedral-like castle and warm, fantastical, upbeat colors and tone. It contrasted greatly from my previous projects, as well as from most scenes that I see on ArtStation these days, so I was hopeful that it would stand out. And now that I knew what I was aiming to create, it was time to start setting up my project. So, in the following slides, I'm going to walk you all through my environment building process. My first step is always to plan and block out my scene. Next comes modular kit and materials, and I usually do these steps simultaneously as they often rely on each other for fine tuning. Next, I finalize my foliage, my lighting, and finally finish with world building and polish work once the rest of my scene is established. So, my first step in any project is gathering reference. For this project, I focused on references for my materials and how I wanted them to read, different foliage types, and real life cathedrals. Although the concept was a really amazing start, I find it's always good to supplement concept references with real life images to help ground the scene. And I find this really, really important for architecture. And next, I started to begin breaking up my scene into modular kit pieces. So here's a quick visual representation of how I approach splitting up the concept into modular pieces. And while I was sketching over my concept, I was also blocking out pieces in Maya to determine what scale I wanted everything to be. And here's a quick photo of my modular kit while it was a work in progress. And I didn't move forward with all of these pieces, but a good majority of these were in my final kit. And here is a breakdown of most of my final kit. This isn't everything, it didn't fit in one screenshot, but all of these pieces were modeled in Maya, and the height information was achieved using nanite displacement in my material. So I was able to texture my entire mod kit with my tiling bricks, brick and copper trim sheets, as well as a glass material. And I was able to reuse a lot of shapes throughout my mod kit, which saved time as well as kept the motifs consistent so that they felt like they all belonged in the same building. And most of this kit was created really early on, like you just saw in the old screenshot. Um, but there was a lot of small details that weren't present in the concept that I modeled later on as need be. And I like to keep my kit as concise as possible, and only expand when it's needed so that I don't overcrowd my scene or waste time on pieces that I'm not going to use. So, like I mentioned earlier, what I wanted to focus on most during this project was material creation. So, I created my materials with a workflow that was new to me, which was sculpting the height maps and finishing the materials in Substance Designer. Previously, I've stuck purely to Substance Designer or Substance Painter for all my texturing. So, to create my trim sheet, I started with a sketch of what I wanted to make. Here's that sketch. Um, and from there, I created a simple blockout of it in Maya, measuring the sections to make sure that it matched the metrics in my scene. Then I imported that blockout into ZBrush, where I sculpted the stone details onto the surface. And for the bricks, I made 6 different bricks in ZBrush, and I arranged them into a brick wall pattern. I then did a second pass of sculpting on top of these bricks, just to differentiate them in size, silhouette, and a little bit of noise. And I took both of the documents and exported their height information as a texture, which I was able to bring into Substance Designer as a base to finalize all my materials on. And although my height maps were mostly complete from ZBrush, I did a little bit of fine tuning in Designer. And then after that, I was able to generate my diffuse, roughness, metallic, height, and ambient occlusion maps. During this stage, I also did the destroyed brick textures that I would later use for mesh painting, following the same method that I described before. And foliage was one aspect of this project that challenged me, since I don't have extensive experience making foliage. And the first foliage that I made for my scene was the grass. And I actually used 2 different methods to create my grass. So the first time around, I stuck with a method that I've used for years, which were grass cards. So I blocked out a clump of grass in Maya and baked it onto a plane in Painter, where then I could finalize the rest of the maps in Designer. And I used that grass clump as alpha cards in SpeedTree to make small, medium, and large grass clumps. But when I spread those throughout my landscape in Unreal, the cards seemed very stiff and they didn't have a fun silhouette that I was hoping for. So for the second method, I decided I was going to use the full capabilities of Unreal and make my grass cards individual blades that were full meshes to use nanite. So I created some procedural blades in Designer and I exported them on an alpha map. Then I cut them out in SpeedTree and made the grass clumps with individual grass blades. So this gave me more freedom and flexibility to use different forces on the grass, so I could bend and push the grass blades into a much more interesting silhouette. So in addition to scattering the new grass across the landscape, I also hand painted some instances of it in different areas of my scene where I felt like the grass could use some breakup. And finally, for the last foliage, the ivy and the bushes, I sculpted a high poly of the leaves in ZBrush, and I textured them in Substance Painter. You may have noticed that there was no ivy in the original concept, and that was something that I decided to add near the end of my project, and I'll touch upon that a little bit later. But since I added the ivy near the end, I was actually able to use my final modular kit pieces to grow the ivy on the surface. And it gave my ivy the impression that it actually grew on the walls and within the cracks and the grooves on the surface, but it was still versatile enough where I could use it as a bash kit on other kit pieces if I needed to. And now that all my materials and models were finalized, it was time to start assembling and polishing everything inside of Unreal. So this is when I set up mesh painting in my material, and I set it up on a second UV set. This allowed me to paint the broken bricks and destroyed stone onto my meshes, and it also was able to give me relief between any repetition or tiling that was noticeable. I also made a few decals to use in combination with the mesh painting for a few different results. So I hand painted the drip decals in Photoshop, and those let me give some roughness breakup to the surface as well. And the destroyed stone and the cracked decal I actually sculpted in ZBrush following the similar method that I described earlier for the materials. And I applied these pretty much everywhere on my scene, and it really helped bring it to life. So simultaneously to everything that I mentioned, I was building my scene in Unreal. And the key that I think is really important to blocking out your modular kit is nailing the scale really early on so that you can re-import newer meshes and not have to worry about Z-fighting or clipping because you're making the new meshes taller or shorter. If you're able to really nail the scale early on, it makes it super, super easy to re-import meshes quickly. And I also think it's really important to build your scene before everything else is finalized so that you get an idea of scale, composition, and lighting while you polish everything else. And another world building tip that I used were pack level actors. For any repetitive walls, pillars, or background elements, I turned them into pack level actors, which let me really easily reposition sections of my scene and update them all instantly with any adjustments that I made. And it kept my scene really organized, and I didn't have to deal with the mess that grouped actors can create. And when it was time to mesh paint, and I made sure that my layout was completely finalized, I dissolved the pack level actors so that I could edit them per instance with any unique polish or painting that I wanted to do. So now that you guys just got a quick sneak peek at my final project, I wanted to take a bit of time to touch upon my experience during my mentorship. So I'm going to go over a few key points that stood out to me during my mentorship, which were learning opportunities, professional feedback, and personal growth. So I think the most obvious thing that I got out of the mentorship was new technical knowledge and techniques to try thanks to Jonathan's demos and feedback. I saw technical growth through sculpting techniques, substance designer techniques, as well as just getting an insight into how AAA studio artists approach problem solving. The step-by-step input from my mentor was extremely helpful to know how to approach each step when building my scene. And that leads us into feedback. So I was able to get more eyes on my project, not only by Jonathan, but thanks to the VesselForge community as a whole. I had many opportunities to connect with both other mentees and other mentors. This got me a wide range of feedback from artists with different backgrounds. And weekly feedback in the mentorship meetings really holds you accountable to get your work done. I saw consistent and meaningful progress between each week due to these scheduled meeting times. And another key element of feedback that I was able to receive was regarding my portfolio as a whole. Jonathan helped me take a methodical approach to building my portfolio, which wasn't just advice that I could use when I was starting out choosing this project, but it's something I can take with me in the future when deciding on my portfolio and starting new projects as well. All right, and the final point that I want to touch upon regarding the mentorship relates to personal growth that I experienced. So, speaking with Jonathan really helped me grow my problem solving skills when I was analyzing my own work. So, I was able to learn when to cut content in a well thought out way, how to analyze my work artistically and technically, and how to receive and apply feedback. Finally, the last important point was how to set goals and act upon them. So none of these concepts were new to me, but having an opportunity to talk them through and get the thought process with Jonathan gave me a deeper insight into their thought process and how I could apply it to my own work. And this is just a quick fun highlight of VesselForge mentorship, and I really liked the opportunities to showcase your work on VesselForge social medias. It was really great exposure for like a smaller artist who wouldn't normally get a ton of views or interactions. And being able to connect with fellow mentees through the Discord was really cool as well. It was really great to be able to receive feedback and give feedback to the other mentees. So, the experience I had with VesselForge was my first mentorship. So, I'm just going to take a little bit of time to talk about advice on how to get the most out of your mentorship. Some of this I used myself, and some of it I wish I knew beforehand. So, the number one tip that I have is to set goals and expectations for your project beforehand. If you have any specific learning outcomes you want, let your mentor know and keep them in mind when you're choosing a concept or the project that you want to make. Make sure that you talk it over with your mentor and make sure that you can hit all of those goals with the project you're planning on making. Next is to be proactive both inside and outside of your meetings. I recommend you plan ahead with what you want to get feedback on and what you want your mentor to demo or talk about during your meeting. Going off of that, I want to say to work hard and make sure that you have consistent progress between the meetings so that the feedback your mentor gives can be more impactful. And the VesselForge Discord is a really great resource. Make sure to utilize it fully by connecting with other mentees and trying to give feedback when they ask, as well as posting your work to get more feedback from them as well. And finally, just make some conversations with your mentor about their industry experience. You'll get to learn a lot of cool things. You can learn about how they go about finding jobs, insight into some of their past studios, or maybe even advice on art tests. Whatever you might be curious about, your mentor is there to guide you, and I suggest to take advantage of it. So, I know I just threw a lot at you all at once, so if you have any questions about VesselForge mentorships, stick around to the end and we'd be happy to answer those as well. Okay, so on the next few slides, I'm going to touch upon some of the challenges I had during this project and how I approached problem solving with Jonathan's guidance. So, the concept that I chose had really beautiful lighting, and I tried really hard to recreate it, but the concept didn't always follow the rules that real life light behaves by. So, when I tried to mimic the color of the scene just with materials, it felt a little muddy and imbalanced with the lighting that I had originally. So, I tried to create a mockup in Photoshop of what I wanted my scene to look like using a few smart adjustment filters. And because of that, I was able to create a custom lookup table in Photoshop with those layers, and it really helped unify the colors in my scene in a more cohesive and thoughtful way with a complementary color palette. So here's the before and the after I applied the lookup table to my scene. And this scene was by far one of the biggest I've ever made, and although the end result looked impressive, it came with quite a few challenges. So there was a lot of tiling and repetition visible in my scene, so I took a few different steps to solve it. Any large, awkward spaces I filled with some small to medium details from real life references, which helped not only to ground my scene, but also it broke up any flat surfaces and helped to hide some of the tiling. But I couldn't do that everywhere because I wanted to preserve areas of rest and not make the scene overcrowded with noise. So, to fill up the rest of the areas, this is where I utilized mesh painting to paint in cracks and damage to my walls. And those steps together took my scene from looking like this to this. Um, but I still felt like the scene was a little bit too balanced and repetitive. So that's why I decided to introduce the ivy on the surface of the castle. And that got me this final result. You might have noticed some of the earlier screenshots looked really different from my end result. So I entered this project trying to combine two different concept references because they both shared similar motifs, such as color palette, composition, and mood. And my main vision was to create an environment which felt grand and almost royal, and both the color palettes and architecture of the concept supported that. But while I was in the blackout phase of my project, I felt as if those goals just weren't communicated well in my scene. So, with Jonathan's help, I reflected on my scene and I identified some aspects which I felt could be improved. A main point of feedback I got from Jonathan was the sense of scale of the castle not feeling grand, and the foreground is one area especially where I realized it felt cramped and it was distracting from the main focal point, which was supposed to be the castle. And you'll see here in the first few images, the castle almost felt like an afterthought with how much the foreground was obstructing it. So I decided to remove the foreground influences and just really reflect on how important it was for me to focus on my goals and how they're reflected in my references. So ultimately, I removed the first concept reference and went fully into the castle one that you guys saw earlier, which gave me a lot more clarity moving forward. And you'll see here, these are some of the screenshots along the way when I was experimenting with merging the two, and the final solution where I removed the foreground. So now that we've gone through all of the learning outcomes, I just wanted to talk about some of the fun stats in my scene. So the final modular kit consisted of 62 pieces, and there were approximately 8,170 instances of those in my scene. And I can't even track how many hours I spent on this project, but I finished it roughly over the course of 4 months, removing some of the breaks that I took in between. And I used a few resources for this project. I used William Faucher's Easy Fog and Easy Mapper. And I typically like to build out all the shaders for my personal projects myself, but I decided for time's sake on such a big scene that I would use a pre-assembled shader as a starting point. Easy Fog was also a great addition to get some really beautiful clouds in my scene quickly, and they really match the painterly feel in my reference. And a key takeaway I have when using these resources is to customize them for your own needs. I don't recommend just throwing the blueprint in the scene and calling it a day. Really spend the time to break down the shaders and understand what's working behind the scenes so that you still have learning outcomes when using the resources. And finally, all this knowledge and hard work and feedback that I got culminated into this final project. Here is the main image of my scene, and it's the shot that I spent most of my time building around, but I do recommend setting your cameras really early on and swapping between them so that you make sure there aren't any areas that are left out. And I also have a few close-up shots. Yeah, and then here's a quick video fly through. Um, I don't think my project is I think most artists will agree that your projects are never fully done. So one thing that I want to do is go back and add some VFX or moving components so that the scene has a better sense of life in my videos. Um, but yeah, that's all that I have for you guys. Thank you so much to everyone who showed up for my presentation. Wow, there's a lot of people now. um, it was really great to have this opportunity to share my work through Vessel Forge. And I just want to give a shout out to the entire Vessel Forge team for giving me this opportunity, and especially to Jonathan for being a really amazing mentor. And here's a few links to my socials. Feel free to connect, keep in touch, ask me any questions. You can DM me if you have anything that you want to discuss. But we also have time for a Q&A. So I'd love to hear if any of you guys have questions in the audience about my project or mentorship experience. It's a great time to ask questions about VesselForge in general. We have some people in the audience who I'm sure could help answer those. But yeah, thank you so much.
I am applauding for everybody here, yes. Thank you so much, Layla. That was
Thank
wonderful.
you.
I really wish you guys were, I mean, some of you really were at GDC, but seeing this on the big screen was also amazing too. Uh, I think it was amazing. I love your point about just how, you know, you get to connect with the other mentees as well. And I think I speak for a lot of us that when we were there at GDC and all kind of supporting each other during the presentations. It was very like high camaraderie. Like I felt like we
Yeah.
were all kind of our own family there representing Vessel Forge, but also like really fawning over all of our projects because they were so incredibly good. People were actually walking up to us and saying like, "Oh, when does this game come out?" You know, like it
Yeah.
was pretty incredible to see. But we do have some questions. I
Yeah.
wanted to go back to Salas, actually. He asked one about nanite tessellation, saying that it
Yeah.
can be pretty tricky on the edges. So he just wanted to know
Yes.
how you approached that. Um,
Yeah. So basically, if you have any hardened normals, nanite displacement will split the mesh apart. So the way that I tried to combat this is on any edge that would be hardened, I would just add ton of extra edge loops and have everything be softened in Maya. So when I exported the mesh like that, then there was a lot less breakage in the mesh. And there were a few parts, you can see that the castle is really big, so some parts in the background, I didn't bother doing that. It would just take a lot of time to do that to the models. So parts that were super far away, I just left it, and you don't notice that there's some
there you
seams in
go.
it. But if you do want to combat that, it's pretty easy, just adding extra edge loops and softening all the edges, and it pretty much removes all of the separation.
All right, all right. There was a follow-up question to that
Okay.
was so another thing that somebody really struggles with sometimes is scale. I was gonna ask like
Yeah.
if you had any other kind of words of advices for pre-work, like on, getting your scene set up, like how you kind of go into it thinking about scale, maybe a little more in depth.
Yeah. So I try and set up all my scales to like a real life scale. This project was a little bit different because it was just a massive, massive castle, so I had to like fake a few things to get it looking right in the scene. But
Mm,
for some of my past projects, normally how I go about it is I work in meters. So my kit pieces are always 1 to 4 meter pieces. And I try and reference everything to real life scale. So I always have, you can just real person and stick them in your Maya scene when you're working or whatever software you use and reference all your props, all your doors, windows, everything to your person
hmm
and just think like, hey, is this an appropriate size for the person's scale? Is the doorway like 10 times the size of the person or like can they even fit through it?
Right.
And it never has to be exact, but as long as it feels appropriate, then your scene is going to feel like it's a proper scale. Just just referencing things to each other, like all your props should feel like they're appropriate sizes compared to one another, and your buildings should feel appropriate size compared to your props. And as long as you do that and take some time to research like real life scales and try and translate it into what fits in your scene, um, then the skill in your scene will feel a lot more appropriate.
Oh, thank you. That's really good. Those are some really good
Yeah.
tips. I think anybody, even if you're in other departments, focus areas, we always struggle with scale. Just kind of finding little quick hacks and things to make your process a little easier and maybe take up less time too. Sometimes you just have to stack bodies to see how tall a building
Yep.
is. Um,
Yep.
Okay, we got one from Rayana here. Thank you. She says, thank you
Yeah.
so much for the presentation, by the way, Layla. I'm curious about the foliage part. Did you use the Unreal Engine foliage tool to fix the flatness of grass in the beginning of stages?
I did use the foliage tool for all of my foliage in the scene. But I also applied, this is unrelated to the question, I'm just explaining it a
hmm
little bit more. That I applied the foliage through my material. So wherever the grass landscape material was, it would automatically spread foliage throughout it, which was really cool. So I could just plug it in and then it would spread foliage, like, because the grass is everywhere in my
Oh,
scene. It would have taken forever to like hand paint it in. So I did it procedurally through my material. Um, but I did not use the foliage tool to fix the flatness of the grass. I did that in my mesh itself in SpeedTree. So that went a long way, just having the mesh itself already have a unique silhouette. worked a lot better than trying to do it with the foliage tool. But one thing I did do in the foliage tool is make sure that it did like change the scale of my grass a bit. It didn't spawn every single medium grass clump at one time scale. It scaled them up and down a little bit, which gave a little bit more contrast to my grass.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Um, let's see. Nabir is asking how long it took you to complete the project. I know you had mentioned about 4 months, right? If you were to add up
Yeah,
everything without the breaks.
yeah,
It's
I
a
was
long
working on
time.
it for I think six or 7 months total before GDC, and I put out the final result. But I also went on a long vacation throughout that, and then
There you go.
got a little lazy after that. I was like, I want to stay relaxed.
You gotta rest your
So
eyes
there was like
after
a
taking a
few,
big
yeah,
project like that on.
yeah. Yeah, I was spending a lot of time working on it during the mentorship. So after that, I was like, hey, I'm gonna chill for a little bit, take a break, and then come back and revisit it. Um, so I think if I remove all the breaks, it was around 3 or 4 months.
There
But
you
I was
go.
also working full time, so I wasn't able to dedicate like my entire day to this. It would be I would come home from work at like 6 p.m., eat dinner, and then spend the rest of the night working on the project.
I want to ask, at what point during this project, I guess, did you feel you were starting to think about needing that extra help or like that extra support, like for a mentorship, like to dive into a mentorship to kind of help you get across that finish line, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually started it in the mentorship.
Oh, you started it.
Um,
Okay. Gotcha, gotcha.
yeah, so I completely started it at the mentorship. I've been wanting to do personal work on the side,
Hmm.
but I felt like I couldn't get super motivated to do it. And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity. I could talk it through with a mentor, work through any like issues I had in the project, as well as have some kind of structure that would really motivate me to keep going on it. Um,
Right.
so that's why I decided to take the mentorship in the first place.
Right. And this was the only mentorship you took, right? Was just the environment one?
Yes, it was just the environment one with Jonathan. Yeah.
Fantastic. Very good. Any tips, actually, while I'm on that topic, any tips for somebody interested going into a mentorship, but they also work full time, they also have other projects they're working on? Like, what do you
Yeah.
typically, like, what are some really good time management tips or kind of haikus you tell yourself every day that, hey, I got this?
Yeah. Um, I'm kind of a workaholic, so
Mm,
I'm kind of always working.
vibe.
Um, I feel like it was really great for me to do personal work because when you're working in the industry, you don't always get to do everything you want. You have to support the art director's vision and support what design needs to make the game as a whole. Um, so this was just a really great creative outlet for me where I could do a project where I'm like, wow, I'm fully invested in
Hmm.
all of this and I get to do what I want and have my own say in every part of it, which I think that in general helped me kept going. So really try and choose a project that you are completely like in love with. You're like, I like
Yeah.
everything about this. I'm super passionate about making this, and it helps you keep going even when you're tired. Because like when I was working on this, I was always tired. I
Mm.
would get home from work and I would just like want to sleep. But being so passionate about this project really helped me keep going. Um, as well as just reminding yourself to post pictures of it. Um,
Oh, that's a
like I
big
was
one.
always trying to post I was always trying to post pictures just like in my like Discord chat with my friends. I would post a picture like work in progress and people would react to it, they would give feedback and it would just help me keep going. But also posting it in the Vessel Forge server because like like I mentioned, other mentees will comment on it or even other mentors who you're not working with will comment on it. And that's just really inspiring to get just a bunch of eyes on it and it helped me keep going and gave me more feedback to work on, and ultimately just made it a better project.
That's lovely. Yeah, I completely agree. It is much easier to fix a project or make adjustments at the early stages. So the quicker and easier you or more comfortable you are with sharing your work, the faster you'll honestly be able to get to your end result because you'll have received so much feedback and guidance at that point. And it's good to have
Yeah.
like that support network. I really think that that is true, that having kind of a backup system to give you some extra kudos, especially during those really hard or challenging times when you're in the middle of a project and you're kind of near that fizzle out point, but you're like, no, I must keep going
Yep.
because this is my project. I can't just abandon it. That having that support group really helps, especially in those times.
Yeah.
Yep. On topic, would you say that you get more out of a mentorship if you go in with an ongoing project, or you have a finished project you need to go back and refine?
I'm gonna say it pretty much touch upon just what you just said. Like getting a lot of
Hmm.
feedback earlier in the process makes it go a lot smoother from the end because honestly, the blackout stage is really, really important. The
Yeah.
blackout stage defines scales, it defines composition, and it's a lot easier to change things when they're just gray boxes than it is later on when you've already sunk a ton of time into modeling. So I would always say that it would be best to do it earlier on. You'll get a lot of feedback from the start and you'll make sure you have a really good foundation. And then it's up to you just to take that really good foundation and detail it and polish it, which I think is
Hmm.
one step that like it's easier to do on your own to detail it and polish it than to completely start from scratch. Um, so yeah, I would suggest doing the mentorship earlier on in the process.
Hmm.
That way you'll get a really good foundation.
Agreed. And then, of course, if you did have like a finished or quote unquote, like if you did feel like you had a finished project, you could still ask for guidance on like what you could do differently next time. Like I think that
Yeah.
sometimes we need to put, like if it's a personal project, especially, like you can put personal projects behind you and take whatever it was that you learned or grew on from that personal project and implement it into your next one. Sometimes mileage is really what counts. So the more you do something repetition wise, like the better you're going to get at it, right? So, you can go into a mentorship, I think, with something unfinished and make the most out of it more than you could with a finished project because you don't have to start from scratch. You're kind of in the middle of your experimentation phase and kind of getting your hands dirty. Um, I think that also you touched on a really good point was kind of taking screenshots, like documenting your process along the way too. I think a lot
Yeah.
of us forget to do that. I am very guilty of that myself when it comes to concept art and illustration. I'm just like, oh man, I totally just kept this all on one layer. I probably should have snapshotted something to
Yeah.
prove that I got to this point. Really important to document your process, guys. It leads into Leo's question here. What do you find is the most important when it comes to showing your process in a portfolio or ArtStation post?
So I think the best thing to show in your process is literally everything, just your thought process of how you approach the project, how you problem solve, and every step along the way. Like, you don't have to go into crazy amounts of detail,
Hmm.
but like what I did here, where I would say, oh, I started my foliage in ZBrush, and here's a screenshot of it in ZBrush, and then I finished it in Painter, and here's a screenshot of it in Painter, because it gives an employer they know how you work. They can look at your breakdown and they can see, oh, this is the workflow that this person uses. Is it going to align with what we do at our studio or not? And that helps them know really early on, like, yes, this person is going to be a really great fit for our team. It makes the interview process go smoother, all of that. Um, so I think being able to break down just all aspects of your process is really, really important. Um, just get your workflows out there. It can be high level. It doesn't need to be super detailed. But as long as you can share how you made something, how you started and got to the end result is really important. And for me, I also like adding in some problem solving in my breakdowns because that's always a question
Hmm.
that the interviewer will ask. They're like, "What did you struggle with on this project, and how did you solve it?" So writing that down in your breakdown forces you to already think about those things. So when you get asked that question, you can just pull it up and be like, "This is exactly it." You can see like
Hmm.
screenshots from what it looked like before and how I problem solved it, and screenshots of what it looked like after. So it's not just talking about something, you can actually show them like this is what I did and this is how I resolved it.
Hmm. I agree. I think that's something that recruiters do look at, art directors look at. They want to make sure that you know how to problem solve. That is the biggest key there. They also want to see how you approach a process too. Again, that problem solving factor is extremely important. It also just kind of proves that you are manually doing this as well. Everything is kind
Yeah.
of it's hard to determine fact from fiction these days, if you know what I'm saying. So it's good to just document, show your work, show your breakdowns. I'd say like a good honestly go to is if you have some favorite artists that you follow that are in the line of work in which you want to get a job in. If you're an early career student or you're a junior artist, like start really analyzing how your favorite artists that are already working in those roles like break down their projects. And you can sort of emulate that in your own work. Maybe you see something that they go into depth in explaining, and I think that that's something maybe you could also emulate if you have something that you need to go more in depth about in your projects. So, stealing like an artist is okay, as long as you're, of course, putting your own voice in there, I think, and it gives you a good launching point too if you don't know where to start. Um,
Yeah, that's really good portfolio advice in general. Is
yeah,
just what studio you want to go to, emulate some of their portfolios, how
that's
they show
right.
their work, how they break down their work. It's really important.
That's right. Let's see. Another couple questions. Do you have to manipulate, sorry, do you have to manipulate the camera settings as well in order to achieve that grand look for the scene, like making it into a wider lens? Like, what are some of the things you did to make it look so grandiose?
Yeah, I did do that with my camera, a little bit. I played with the
Okay.
focal point, and it did make the castle look taller, and it gave it like a it made it look like it went thinner as it went up, which was really cool, and it was something that happened in the concept. So being able to mess with the focal point like that did make the castle look bigger.
Hmm.
Um, but in general, the castle was also just pretty massive. It was really tall. I don't have a measurement for how tall the castle ended up being. Um, but I'm just gonna say it was really tall. And it would not fit in the camera if I used a regular focal point.
Hmm.
Like whatever the not the focal point, but yeah, wherever the lens was in the Unreal camera when you drag it in, my castle did not fit in it. So I did have to mess with the focal length to get the castle to fit in the scene either way.
It also gives it that really cool dynamic angle anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it was really cool to do that. And I wouldn't use that as your like technique to make your scenes look taller. Because it doesn't really you can't fake it like that. You
Hmm.
do have to have like really tall aspects in order for
Field
like
of
the
view.
effect to really
Yeah,
push it
thank you.
in your scene. Yeah. Yeah, field of view. Yeah, that was it. I couldn't think of the word.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. Uh yeah. So I would not just mess with those settings to make your scene look tall. You have to have a combination of both, but it does give you a really dynamic angle when you use it.
It's good for the glory shots, but everything else behind the scenes needs to be accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely did that in my like second shots, the detail shots, those all had like the default field of view. So they didn't look like manipulated or stretched in any way.
Cool. Let's see. Uh, we have one question. How long was your mentorship, and were you completely new to environment art before? I know we kind of covered that, but I figure for anyone else who just joined.
Yeah. So my mentorship was 8 weeks. So it was 8 different sessions.
Mhm.
And I was not completely new to environment art. I actually was already working in the industry at that point. Um, and I do know that there's been a lot of people who have taken the Vessel Forge mentorships at different experience levels. And maybe you can answer this better, but I do know that Jonathan does say to have a foundation in environment art before applying for the mentorship so that they can make sure that you hit your goals.
That's what it really is all about, honestly, is just having a good your good fundamentals down with whatever focus area you're wanting to get into with these mentorships. You know, we have two tiers, right? We've got the 4 week and we have the 8 week. But, you know, if you really think about it, that's not a super long time, right, for a mentorship to go on for. You know, it's not like a diploma course, right, where you get to take like a year's worth of class, right? So these moments with our mentors are very precious. And I think that, you know, you coming in with already a sense of what is required, you don't have to already have had an industry job per se, but you do have to have dabbled with the materials, dabbled with the software, have a good solid sense of foundational work with whatever, you know, if you're interested in the lighting mentorship, right? Like you know how to light a couple scenes, you know how the tools work, but maybe you need to up the ante on the level of experience and the level of workflow techniques that you can experiment with, right? You're needing a little bit more guidance on those types of things. So definitely come into our mentorships with like a pre notion or like some experience with all of those tools. You know, it is rough on the very, very, very beginner just because, you know, our mentors are, again, taking very small amounts of time with you, but also very impactful amounts of time with you. So you're going to want to come in very prepared. And I like what you said, Layla, earlier, was coming into these mentorships with a really solid goal in mind, something that really helps you stay on track and stay focused throughout that mentorship so that when you're utilizing the feedback sessions, you come in with questions already ready to go. Your mentor already knows exactly how to work with you and give you those very precise levels of feedback that you need. And all of these mentorships are very customized to you. So that just changes week to week based on what your needs are and what your project's needs are. So yeah, I would recommend just coming in with some pre-experience of those softwares and of your setups and personal projects as well. Um, but let's see. We had a couple more questions here. Um, because it relates, I'm gonna come right back to you. Let's see. How did you allocate the 8 sessions throughout the duration of your project? Was it once or twice every month? Uh, I guess I can kind of answer that. It's a 1 week, or sorry, it's consecutive week to week, these mentorships. I will say every now and then, right? Like we are human. We also have our mentors that work in industry right now that do have schedules and work deliverables they also have to make. So it is very rare, but it happens where we need to push a week, every now and then, but it is very consecutive. We do meet usually at the same time, same place each week for consistency. And we always do coordinate ahead of time with you and your schedule, with our mentor's schedule. So we make sure that everything aligns and is very convenient for you both, or as convenient as it could possibly be. Some of us are working remotely, some of us are from other ends of the world. So we always do our best to coordinate and make sure that everybody's set up for success that way. Um, Back to modeling a brick wall. Do you have a tip to make it tileable and not mess it up during the sculpting process?
Yeah. So what I did on for mine was I blocked out all the bricks in Maya. So I made sure that everything was exact. It was in mine was 4 meters by 4 meters. So I made sure that all of the bricks fit within 4 meter to 4 meter space. Um so the bricks on the edge went outside of that 4 meter space. That was okay. Um and what I did was I sculpted it outside of that 4 meter space and then I just cropped it. So that what's on those bricks on both sides is going to be exactly the same when you do that. So one brick on one side would be duplicated back to the other side. Um, so all the bricks on the edges, I would sculpt all the detail on there, copy them, and duplicate it exactly 4 meters in the other way. So it is the same brick on each side of the wall. So when you crop it, the details will line up perfectly because you've already sculpted it just as one brick total. And it's the same brick on both sides. So that was how I did it. So that when I cropped my textures into my like 2048 map, whatever I used for that, it would have the same details on both sides. I know there's a few different methods to do it. There's a lot of videos on YouTube about making tiling textures.
Hmm.
But since I did all of my bricks as their own meshes, I didn't like sculpt the impression of a brick on a surface. I made them actual bricks. Um, yeah, so I did have all of the lines already offset when I brought it into ZBrush. But what I did was I took all of the bricks on the edge and I just basically not mirrored them, but I brought them exactly 4 meters over to the other side. So it's the same brick on both sides. But yes, I did slide each of the lines to have their irregularity in Maya already, so that they already had that right pattern when I brought it in.
Awesome.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah,
more
that's
helpful if I
cool.
had a visual, but hopefully that answered it okay. If you want to shoot me a message, I can like send some screenshots of that
Yeah,
to
make a
make it make a little more
tutorial. There you
sense.
go.
Make a tutorial. Maybe
Heck
I could,
yeah.
yeah.
You really
Yeah,
could.
I could show that from my most recent project. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We've got a couple more
Yeah.
minutes here for some more questions. Feel free to drop in more questions, guys. We'll try and cover them. Let's see. Was the goal to make this game optimized? And if so, what poly count target did you have for such a huge scene, and what did you end up with?
Really fast answer for that, no. I think a
Yeah.
big tip is that most of your portfolio pieces should not be optimized. You want to have like the biggest wow factor, like show this is everything I can do, like with no limitations, this is what I can do, because it's a lot easier when you're in a studio to teach someone how to optimize something and how to pull back than it is to like have to show them how to make like super detailed work. So I think that's one tip that I get told a lot, that I tell people a lot, is like if you're making a prop, you don't want the prop to be faceted in any way. You want to have really high poly count so that anything that's round is perfectly round. Um, so for my scene, it was not exactly optimized, but I also did use nanite.
Mhm.
So poly count really didn't matter that much. And all of my assets were well within a reasonable poly count, even without nanite. Um, so like I mentioned, they were really pretty basic models, and I let the material work and the displacement with nanite do a lot of the heavy lifting for me in my scene. Probably one of the more unoptimized things was my foliage. I only nanited the grass. So the ivy and stuff were pretty heavy. But
Mm.
again, like since it's just for portfolio, I'm just taking screenshots. It doesn't have to be super optimized. As long as like your computer can run Unreal and run your scene, that's pretty much um where I would say to have it at.
Lovely. I was gonna ask, like, for starting a big project like this, what are some of the things that go through your mind in terms of like where you want to start, where you want to finish? Like, do you usually preconceive like a timeline for when you have all of your deliverables mapped out to make this project a success, or do you kind of just wing it and kind of dive in and just keep working at it until it's completely finished? Or what are some like good tips that you would give somebody wanting to start a project like this from start to finish?
Yeah, I usually go with the flow. Like I make myself a plan of what I'm going to do every day. So like at the start of the week, I'm going to say this week I'm going to work on my materials Monday. I'm going to finish the materials Tuesday after getting some feedback. Wednesday I'm going to move on to something else, blah blah blah. So I plan it out week by week. But I don't do like an overarching plan for my environment because I feel like you always run into issues that you don't
Hmm.
see yourself running into. And if you have like a massive plan, it's really hard to ever stick with it because things are going to come up. You're gonna be like, hey, I want to spend a little bit more time on this instead of this thing. So I wouldn't suggest to have like a huge plan for everything, but I definitely pace myself week by week. Like I make myself individual sprints, and I'm like,
Mm.
okay, in this sprint, I'm gonna get this stuff done, and then I try and hit that, and it keeps me a little bit more accountable to my own work when I do that, and it also just feels good at the end of the day to check a box off. Like if I
There
make a
you go.
checkbox of what I'm gonna do and I'm able to check it off, that keeps me motivated and it keeps me going. Um, so that's definitely like the biggest piece of advice I have is I don't it doesn't work for everyone, but it definitely works for me to have those checkboxes and mark things off as I go. Um, but having a general plan of what it takes to build that environment is really useful. Like
Hmm.
knowing I'm gonna have to model everything,
Hmm.
and I'm gonna have to sculpt maybe these things and just do modeling in Maya for these things. That's a good plan because that helps you break down what you're gonna do on each step. Um, and knowing like when you're gonna start doing lighting and when you're gonna finally polish lighting is useful because that affects the way that your materials read, and you have to make sure that your materials will read whatever, no matter what the lighting is, following PBR rules. But just having that general sense of what comes when is really useful. And I know that was a really helpful element of the Vessel Forge mentorship as well. Is Jonathan did give me a little calendar, and it said like you
Ah,
should be
okay.
working on these this week, these that week. And obviously I didn't finish this whole project in 8 weeks. That never would could have
Right, right.
happened. Uh, but I was able to keep following that schedule on my own time, as well as getting a first pass of everything on that schedule during the mentorship. That was really helpful. Like, I wasn't going to finish all my materials within the 8 weeks, but I could do a first pass so I could get feedback on it. So, normally, like, you would start with your block out and then start working on the models and the materials, and that would take you the whole week, the whole 8 weeks on its own. So, I tried to do all those steps a little bit and a little bit quickly so that Jonathan could give me feedback on everything, like even my lighting, even like all of that, which was really helpful. And it just set me up in a better way to move on in the future after the mentorship was over.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really great advice and really awesome to hear that it helped you so much with launching basically your project. Having a little calendar off
Yeah.
to the side really does help. It kind of puts your expectations in check
Yep.
too, because I think a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it myself, a lot of students, a lot of folks wanting to invest time in these big, really impactful portfolio pieces, we do jump ahead of ourselves a little bit, or we dive in pretty
Yep.
quick, and we have really like we've got this grand scene in our minds, but then when it actually comes to fulfilling it, we kind of fizzle out halfway through because we're like, wow, this was a bigger undertaking than I thought. It is good to have somebody
Yep.
there to put reality a little more in front of you and say, okay, here are the really tangible steps to like get to this end result. Even though I can't be there with you in an hour session, right? Like every like for 4 months straight while you're making this project,
Yeah.
these are the successes that I see coming out of this if you follow these very specific steps. And then that really does like help align you. And I've had that experience in my own mentorships as well. So I completely agree with you there. Um, let's see. I have a question from
Yeah.
Valentina, and Valentina is actually about to start a material mentorship, which is really cool with us, with Jonathan actually. But what level of
Yeah.
experience did you have with sculpting before starting this mentorship in particular?
Um, I I don't know how to qualify it, but I had a decent bit of experience with sculpting.
Hmm.
It wasn't something that I was super comfortable with, but I knew how to use ZBrush. I knew some tools and techniques in ZBrush. I've sculpted rocks before. I've never sculpted foliage before, but
Wow.
I've sculpted rocks before. A few, let me think. Honestly, during college, I tried to avoid sculpting. It wasn't my favorite thing.
Oh.
So I didn't do a lot of sculpting in college. Um, I've sculpted a few props just in my professional work,
Hmm.
and that was pretty much it. So I had a good base. I knew my way around ZBrush,
There
but
you
I
go.
wasn't really great at it. And it wasn't like I wasn't super comfortable doing it. So I feel like being able to go through this process with the mentorship, like do a full material in ZBrush was really helpful, and it did make me a lot more confident in my skills. And after that, taking some of the things that I learned, I went through and I just recently did another sculpting project on my own. Um, and I think it's just helping me just keep being more confident, keep building these skills in ZBrush with sculpting.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, the bigger the project you have, the more chances you have to experiment and kind of get more familiar
Yep.
with the tools that maybe you were a little less confident in tackling before. Like you said, you had never really sculpted foliage before, so that's really impressive that you were manipulating it as you did for this project too. And, I think that's really good advice is to come into your mentorships and come into these larger projects with an open mind. Like you may specialize in one area or you're very keen on working with this particular tool or this particular workflow, but you're going to be introduced to something entirely different. Instead of getting from A to Z this way, you might actually take an entirely different route this next time around and being open, to your mentor's feedback and saying, hey, like, you're actually spending this much more time doing it this way when you could actually just be doing it like this. And even if this looks scary or is kind of like intimidating or like, wow, I've never actually played with that before, it's like you get into the swing of it, you try it out, and wow, voila, it ends up getting you to where you need to be a lot quicker. So that's really cool to hear. Really, really cool to hear. Um, Let's see. I think we are just about at time. I do just want to express again, Layla, thank you so
Yeah.
much for spending this time with us. We obviously everyone here, our peers in the audience, really, really appreciate you for going through your project and just like talking about your process, your work. It's very inspirational for especially all of us who want to start like these bigger portfolio pieces. Maybe even are interested in taking one of our mentorships. And I highly encourage anybody, like it's an open door here. Like if you have questions about the mentorships, if you want to hang out with me and Layla one day, like send us a DM. We can talk about it, right? Like come on and, be vocal about what your needs are here and we'll definitely get you all the answers and advices that you need to succeed. And I just want to thank you all very personally again for supporting this community and being here and attending our events. It really means a lot to us. But definitely check out our website, guys, if you are interested in taking mentorships. We just added a new mentor as well. We're welcoming Doro, who just joined us. She's a UI UX artist, worked on some amazing projects. You should really check out her work. So, words of any last words of advice, Layla, before we call it quits for today?
Oh, that's a big question. Uh, I would just say just always keep working, always keep improving your skills, and make work that you're passionate about. That's a huge thing. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone who came here to watch, who asked questions. I have this whole breakdown on my ArtStation. It's pretty similar to what I presented today. If you have any other questions, want to review anything, but yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, my DMs are always open. I'd love to chat to people about my experience, about my work. Um, but yeah, thank you again for having me. This was really cool experience, so I'm happy to be here.
Oh, thank you, girl. All right, well, I think that wraps it up, everybody. I hope you enjoy your weekend. Stay frosty. Get a very productive weekend ahead of you. Do some art. Go and pet some grass, though, too, while you're at it. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. And thank you again, Layla, so much. It's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Bye everyone. Thanks
Bye,
for coming.
guys.